All right, everyone. Welcome to another Esoterica live stream featuring the fantastic, the wonderful, the amazing, the often proposition to for marriage behind the scenes. Not by me, but by weirdo people on the internet, Dr. Angela Puka. We were just talking beforehand that what probably people don't see behind the scenes is like how much like crazy stuff that we deal with. Like, you know, I think Andrew from Religion for Breakfast he and I were talking about how religious studies people get the the craziest emails, and I was like, well, if you think you get crazy emails, just imagine the kind of stuff that Angela and I get, focusing on not just religion but esotericism and occultism. So we get the cream of the crop, I think. But I just want to welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me this afternoon and celebrating this achievement of Esoterica getting 200,000 subscribers. And I want to also thank Dr. Puka for coming and hanging out with me as well.
I was about to say congratulations, Justin. So happy for you that you reached to 200,000. I cannot even say that, but yeah, it's amazing and totally deserved. I really love your content since the beginning.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, it's
And
amazing that you got to that point.
it's amazing, and again, that's something I think I was talking to Zevi about, who I also would invite on, but Zevi's it's Shabbat already in Israel. But we had to find a way of like getting your content and Zevi's content out there more. I feel like the algorithm just really does you guys a disservice. You're creating such amazing content, and you just do such great work, and we got to find a way of getting getting your content out there more. So, folks, I know there's only some people watching, but if you're watching this after the live stream's over, got to make sure to go subscribe to Dr. Puka's channel and Zevi's channel, Seekers of Unity. But yeah, thank you. It's weird that such a niche thing can actually appeal to such a broad group of people, and I'm very blessed to have the viewership that I have and have made friends along the way, like you. It's
Yeah.
amazing. I mean, we've known each other, I think, since basically the pretty early on in
Yeah,
our
at the
channel.
beginning, yeah, I think so. Yeah, and it was really nice because I think that before us, it was just Andrew that was doing religious studies
I think so.
content on YouTube. Andrew would be Andrew Henry from Religion for Breakfast, for those of you who don't know him, and he also makes amazing content. And but yeah, I think that we were the first esoteric, perhaps more esoteric focused
Yeah,
religious studies
yeah, I think.
channels.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dana Trell, who's going to be joining us here in
Oh
just
yes,
shortly.
yeah,
Yeah,
of
Dr. Trell.
course.
I think he's also been out there for a while doing stuff on esotericism, well, although from a slightly different angle. But it is interesting that of the religious studies people that are on YouTube, there is a huge concentration of esoterica people working on the kind of stuff we work on, which is hilarious because if you actually go to any religious studies department basically in the world, there would be none of us there.
Maybe
Uh,
that's why. Maybe that's why it's we we are trying to reach out on the internet and screaming, "We
we
exist!"
exist, like we are legitimate scholars that that need coverage and jobs.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, maybe that's why we got the academy has pushed us to the fringe, so we populate the dark world of the internet.
yeah, the
I don't
dark
know.
web. Well, we make it dark.
It's true. Yeah, with
It's
our
not
various
YouTube is
aesthetics.
not yeah YouTube is not dark web, but we make it.
It's
We
true.
make it dark.
Did you see there was a couple funny comments about I'm doing this episode this week with you and Philip about our various topics on spirit possession, and I put a picture on my community chat of the images from the 1937 the Dybbuk, and there's several comments about how the actress looks like you.
Ah,
The
I didn't see those comments, but I saw your post and I thought the same thing. And it's like, is that is Justin posting that picture because there's also me in the collaboration, but
it would be funny. You could be really easy for you to go if you want an easy Halloween costume.
yeah,
You
that's
could just
actually an idea. I could
be
cosplay.
the Dybbuk, the character from the Dybbuk,
Mm.
which
I
is a
haven't
great.
watched that movie actually.
You would really like it. I
Mm.
mean, for folks in the live stream, if you guys like German expressionism, which I think is a really, you know, I think one of my favorite styles of movie. I think you would really like it, and it is a very weird, like, it's a very surreal movie. I like the fact that a lot of the movies in like the early 20s and 30s, they didn't know how to make movies yet, and so they just did crazy stuff. And so you get all these really weird special effects and things like that. So if folks haven't seen the Dybbuk, and Angela, you should definitely see it, I think, and you would appreciate it, because it is interesting that the character who plays Leia, once she's possessed by the Dybbuk, she does go like full goth. She looks like a goth from the 1930s, which I don't know.
That doesn't mean that I'm possessed by a Dybbuk.
I don't think you have a Dybbuk. No, I hope not. I hope
You're the expert, so I trust you. Justin.
I'm not. I mean,
if it ends up that I am, you know, I'm kidding.
No, if you have a Dybbuk, then I mean, I could diagnose you having a Dybbuk, but I wouldn't know how to fix you. That would be the bad thing. And it's crazy because if you read a lot of the early Dybbuk lore, they diagnose the Dybbuks, but I mean, I guess we're so used to movies like The Exorcist where they fix the possession in like 15 minutes and it's all over. But almost everyone early on who's possessed by Dybbuks in the 16th century, they die. They will go through the exorcism process, and then they'll get repossessed, and the Dybbuk will kill them, which is I don't know, tragic. So all right, let me I got a super chat. Let me grab the super chats. Thank you for the super chat, Nerdstein Coalition. Are you going to do a Mormon / QAnon episode? Do you like the songs? I do like the songs. They're very clever. And hi to Zevi and Philip. So Zevi, I think, is in Shabbat mode probably, but I don't know what Philip's up to. Yeah, I do want to do an episode. It's funny because I actually have literally right here on my stack of things to do episodes on are the books on Mormonism and the occult. And of course, this little one basically is just a summary of this huge tome. You see how, like, I mean, there's a lot there. There's a lot of there. And it's funny because I wrote one of my undergraduate theses, or whatever you want to call it, on Mormonism and the occult. So it's something I know a little bit about, but I want to go back through both of these and read them. And yeah, I definitely want to do an episode on Joseph Smith and Mormonism and the occult. So that's definitely a thing I want to do. The QAnon stuff would be interesting as well. I don't know. Yeah, but I think that Mormonism and the occult in general is just something that really goes understudied. And clearly Joseph Smith like modeled the temple ritual after Freemason rituals, even to like the throat cutting gesture, which I heard was taken out. Like they actually took that out of the temple rituals. The Latter-day Saints took it out at in the 70s, the 80s, something like that. But it's amazing that literally the temple ritual in the Latter-day Saints movement is directly based on sort of esoteric Freemasonry. So I don't know. Have you studied much?
No, I have to say that I don't know much about it. So I would also appreciate the content so that I will be more educated. I need to read more about it as well.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating religion, and every time I go travel somewhere, I try to go to a Latter-day Saint place, which is really interesting. Like in upstate New York, we went to the birthplace of Joseph Smith, and the Mormons really don't mess around. Like when they build something, they build the most beautiful version you can imagine, and it's just in the middle of like the burnt over district in New York. And it's just the most amazing place. And the elders there were really, really kind, and it was really great. So it was neat. And again, it's this weird American religion, a completely American, not completely American, but largely American religion. So I don't know. It was interesting. But man, what are you working on these days, Dr. Puka? What's in your wheelhouse?
Well, at the moment I'm mostly stressing about my book because I have a deadline for the first draft of the first draft. See, I'm already getting anxious. The first draft of my book for Brio. And but at the same time, I'm also working on the channel and on other publications. And I was on a chat the other day with a couple of professors from the University of Turin, and they want to write the first Italian book on an academic book on Italian paganism, and they invited me to contribute. So that's nice. It's nice to also, write for the Italian academia and in my own language. But on that occasion, I also met a PhD student who was working on Roman traditionalism, Evola, Kremmerz, and I thought, I have to invite you over on my channel because he's also studying the politics behind it, and I think that I kind of wanted to address those kind of those figures, but I think it's a bit difficult, and so I appreciate having an expert over to talk about them.
Yeah, I mean, Evola is just a terribly interesting and important figure,
Mhm.
and again, I think that it's one of those strange things that I think that maybe people on the outside don't get about us as academics. It's like I can dislike what Evola said and still think Evola is crucially
Influential,
important,
yeah.
influential, and more studying. And me studying him and me reading, even people. I think I have a book of Evola somewhere, and when I did the book tour last year, someone was like, "How can you have a book of Evola? Blah 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 blah. That guy was a fascist." I'm like I have books of lots of people that almost 99% of the people that write the books that I have, I don't agree with. Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
have
that's
book.
part of the process. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, I think that's another thing that we face as content creators on the internet. The fact that a lot of people tend to have very black and white mentality. And I think one of the essential part of education, especially higher education, is to develop critical thinking. So it's about, you don't just dismiss something. People should also read the Mein Kampf by Hitler. I think that every piece of information and every document and every book is essential and important. Nothing should be cancelled. Things should be read and analyzed, and you see the problems, and you criticize, and you have a critical understanding of those things.
I totally agree. And also, Evola is just more complicated than like he's a fascist. Like he's,
Yeah.
he's more complicated than that. Everyone is basically, and so yeah, I totally agree with you that if I do an episode about QAnon, it's not because I'm pro QAnon or whatever. It's because this content needs to be made, and I think I've said this before, that if people like us aren't making it, then it'll be left to like real crazy people to make stuff.
Mm.
So yeah, at any rate, it's always somehow comes back to Julius Evola for some reason. But that is
Yeah,
great
but
that
I get lots and lots of comments, people saying, "Oh, make a video on Julius Evola." But at the same time, I don't know why, but sometimes I get that kind of feeling that people kind of expect that you make a video on that, and by doing that you're kind of revealing something about your political alignment. It's not like if I make a video on Julius Evola it means that I'm a fascist. Or on Twitter, for instance, when that the far right has been voted is in the parliament in Italy, and people ask me, "So Angela, what do you think about it? What do you think about it?" That's because I don't usually talk about politics on my channel, but people really want you to sort of state out loud, what position you.
yeah, I get the same thing about Israel stuff. People are like, "What do
Mm,
you think about Israel?" I'm like, "I'm not an Israeli. Like it's not a country. Like I'm not plugged into what's going on there aside from whatever."
mhm,
But yeah, it's weird. It's weird that we're expected to have opinions about things that we don't like. Just because I'm smart about esotericism doesn't mean I know anything about politics or whatever. I don't know.
mm.
But let me pop Dan on, Dr. Trell, the modern hermeticist. I see him lurking there in the shadows. So let me, where we all lurk, I suppose. But let me jump on. Dan, Dr. Trell, how you doing, buddy?
Hi, Dan.
I'm doing well. Nice to meet you, Dr. Puka.
Nice to meet you, Dr. Achel. You can call me Angela, and I hope I can call you Dan.
Of course. Everybody can call me Dan. I'm not much for titles myself, but my graduation is tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, cool.
Hey,
I'm
Mazel
gonna
Tov.
my
Congratulations.
wizard robes.
Yeah. Do you guys? I mean, I know that Angela, I've seen the picture of Angela in her wizard robes from Leeds with
Yes.
the cool puffy, the great puffy hat.
Yeah.
Do you get a puffy hat?
I don't think so. I think I get the like Saturn cube where it's like you are under the dominion now, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I love how every institution has different things.
Finland gets the best. They get a sword.
The sword, yeah, the
Like,
sword, yeah.
Where's my sword?
I totally agree. Finland definitely has and I've seen that sword. Although I have read that if you graduate from a place that doesn't have a sword, that you then are entitled to carry the academic mace for various places. Like, so you can get a mace. I in some sense, a mace is even more metal. I always think of that picture of like Varg Vikernes and Burzum.
Yeah. With the spike bracelets. It's no Warhammer, but it'll do.
It'll do, yeah. So
do they give swords to women too, or is there a distinction?
They must.
there?
I don't know. Maybe there was a time when they didn't and they started, but I'm not sure. I also don't know if
I want a sword too.
Yeah. I also don't know if it's one of those traditions that they inaugurated at some time in the modern age, and it looks traditional, but really it's not really traditional. There's a lot of stuff about academic regalia that is like that, where it's a throwback to a time that never existed.
Right. Yeah, it'd be interesting to know. It's funny. This has revealed something about me. I was so like disgusted at some level with my experience in graduate school that I didn't go to my graduation. And I just like hung out with a bunch of my friends and did something completely different. And so I don't even have the robes, the exact robes that I'm supposed to have. I need to go buy some so I can actually have them. Really, you don't get like the ones that, because if you ever become faculty somewhere, God willing,
you can buy them, but like unless you are tenured and you know that you're going to have to go to a whole bunch of graduations, it's an investment that you would have to put in, and it would have to pay itself off.
Right. It's like buying a tuxedo. You really got to. It's like if you're going to get a tuxedo, then you have to get season tickets to the opera or whatever. Yeah. Otherwise, it's better to rent. Although I
thought I would have hated my gown and hat, but it made me feel like I was in the Renaissance or something.
Yes,
all the velvet.
I didn't like the color scheme because orange and green is a bizarre color combination. But
if you see all those pictures of people in the Renaissance, the garish colors that they like, hot pink was just like the amount of pictures of like scholars in hot pink robes. It was like all the rage. I think like the Victorians also had like it's interesting because you can't see any of the wallpaper from our house, but in the closets, the original wallpaper is there, and it was originally hot pink and yellow, and it like just was all over the walls. I can't imagine it seems like you're in a mental asylum, surrounded by hot pink and yellow.
Look at all these expensive dyes I can buy.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, it's how and one of the things that I'm going to say thanks to AYC Game Design. Apparently, they're at the dentist. So good luck with that. Thank you for the donation, and I hope that your dental situation is remedied. But yeah, you guys may know this, but there are books. Being in the rare book business as much as I am, there are books that were colored with verdigris, and those books actually are poisonous. And if you find one, they're rare. They're worth a lot of money, but they can't be handled because they are literally toxic. Yeah. And so poison books are a thing that exist in the world, but also like the amount of like asbestos in this house is like horrifying.
That's awful.
Oh yeah. I mean, like we have a boiler in our basement. That's the original boiler that was, I'm sure, lowered into the house when the basement was being built. I don't think it's seen sunlight since before the Titanic saw sunlight, but it's like covered in asbestos. It's like super gross and scary. Like you just hold your breath when you go down there.
Yeah, so, serious business, that stuff.
Yeah, it's bad. And it's crazy if you read Greek magical papyri, how many of those required like asbestos. Yeah. Asbestos magic. I'm like, yes, I'm not sure if it's going to it's going to help you, but it will definitely give you like mesothelioma or whatever.
I like that the word just means like inflammable.
Yeah.
It's like that privative A and then like flammable. And they were like, this rock, it doesn't burn. Let's call it asbestos.
It is weird. But yeah, I mean, have you seen those spells that require asbestos in the Greek magical papyri?
I mean, I'm sure I've come across it. I actually have my copy right here, which is a hint to what might be coming in subsequent weeks.
Yeah, that's a content creator's goldmine, isn't it?
Yeah,
just
like, I mean, I just used the like a public domain translation from like 1910 because I don't want to be reading stuff that's copyrighted, and the differences are stark. Like Hans Dieter Best has done a good job at updating some of that older stuff.
Yeah. Any favorite spells from the Greek magical papyri?
Yeah, I mean,
that isn't the Born List ritual. Like not
the one that is coming up.
The one that Crowley butchered.
Yeah. Yes. That is a neat one. I don't know. Angela, you have a favorite magic spell from the Greek magical papyri? I like the goat bile one that keeps out like insects. I mean, that one's actually one we could try. I mean, I'm pretty sure goat bile is a thing we could get access to.
I like all the root cutter stuff. Just like the culture of root cutting. It's just this like not proto-shamanic, but post-shamanic. I don't know if we want to look at it in these teleological terms, but just the survival of that culture of casting spells to extract certain roots and giving incantations and like tying mandrake off to dogs and things like that.
Yeah, that actually shows up also in Josephus. There's a great scene where you need something to exorcise demons, and it's some root that he names. I forget what it is in Greek, but it's not it's the same mythology. You have to tie a dog to it, but it's not clearly mandrake.
Yeah, Pliny has stuff like that too.
Yeah,
and then Ibn Washia, obviously, it's like all that.
That stuff is like off the chain in Ibn Washia, though. Like it's much crazier.
Dan, you have studied the Italian Renaissance a lot, haven't you? For your PhD, was it on Pico della Mirandola?
Yes, and Marsilio Ficino.
And Marsilio Ficino, yeah. Interesting.
So I need to visit because I feel like a distant observer at this point.
I'm a close observer. I think the only magic that is easily kind of easily available in Italian universities is the Italian, the stuff produced in the Renaissance, like Marsilio Ficino, Pico della Mirandola, Giovan Battista della Porta, Giordano Bruno is very known. There are many studies in Italian on Giordano Bruno.
It's a good movie about him.
Yes.
Tommaso Campanella. And quite a few of them were from Naples. So not Marsilio Ficino, but
and Ficino is the most tame of them all, though. So that maybe explains why he was not so the Neapolitans are really the ones who are get kind of nutty. Ficino was really where was he from, Ficino?
Was he from Tuscany? I think.
Is it Figoli? Is that how it's pronounced? I don't even know if it's still a place that exists. That's the problem.
That's interesting. So many of those places still exist. Like I've been to Machiavelli's house where he was exiled after he was kicked out, and where he wrote Il Principe. Like I've been to that. That house is now a restaurant. You can go there and eat in the same room where Machiavelli wrote.
So the place is called Figline Valdarno in Italian, and it is in Tuscany, as I remembered.
On the Arno River, presumably. Yeah.
Is it the case that does Ficino write anything in the vernacular? Do we have or any of his letters? So I wonder how
the work that we just did was both in Italian and Latin, which was very useful when the Latin was ambiguous.
Right.
Can you understand Italian then?
I can read it, but not enough to speak it or anything like that.
Okay. Otherwise, we could have.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Just French. French is my maternal tongue. Although apparently we're not supposed to say that anymore. I don't know.
Interesting.
First language. Is
how much difference is there between, I wonder, like Dante's Italian and Ficino's, like in that couple of 100 years? I wonder to what degree the language if one can read Dante, can one also read Ficino and vice versa?
I think that it's difficult for me to tell because I can obviously read both, but yeah, it's old Italian, and to me they seem similar enough. But I'm not sure for a non-native speaker, because I guess that for a non-native speaker, even the kind of small changes may be perceived as you know. Um, to increase the difficulty of the understanding of the text much more than it might be for me as a native speaker. But yeah, Dante is complicated to read, but Dante was essential in the formation of a Unitarian Italian language.
It's like based on the Toscano
yeah.
dialect, right? Like it's
the Florentine, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who say that modern Italian is born with Dante. I don't know how true that is. I'm not the person who can make that judgment.
Well, at the university, I took an exam on the history of the Italian language for some reason, because I don't know why it was there. There were some exams that I had to do that I still don't understand why I had to. But anyway, yeah. And even when I studied that was also in the text that we were studying for the exam. So I'm guessing that it's correct, because the problem is that some say that some scholars think that the reason why in Italy we have so many gestures is because it took a long time for a Unitarian language to develop, and so we were used to using a lot of gestures to understand each other across regions. Or at the time they were not regions, they were like kingdoms, or but it seems that the development of the Italian language started with Dante, because Dante became so popular that it started spreading across the different areas of the peninsula, and so as a consequence, people started to kind of assimilate that kind of language. And so it's interesting, because in a way it means that Italian is a poetic language, if you think about it that way.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing how one semi-random work of literature can become the standard, upon which an entire language gets built. I don't know. I just think of other, I don't know, like other kinds of languages out there that where the standard text, the one text becomes the standard thing, and all the languages get wrapped around, like the Canterbury Tales or something.
Homer.
Yeah, Homer. And it's amazing, like seeing the huge amount of dialects of Greek, like even to the point where like there are different alphabet schemes for writing other dialects of like Ionic or whatever other forms of Greek that existed, and Homer standardizes it at some level.
Yeah, I think that text and stories have always had a massive power over people. So, for instance, when I see religious studies scholars that study the impact of myth or even TV shows on people and how people think about their religion and how it affects their belief making and meaning making in the world, and it seems like it's something so edgy and new. Whereas I think that it's always been the case. I think it's always been the case that stories, especially powerful stories, have incredibly influenced the way people think about everything, even the metaphysical aspects of their lives or their religious beliefs.
No, I totally agree. That's why also I think it's really great when you see people studying pop culture stuff. Like there's a feedback loop when that stuff gets popular, like even in like religion. Like it's amazing how much popular like pop TV stuff. I mean, esotericism is a clear example of that, where if there's a show, Buffy the Vampire Slayer comes out, it dramatically affected that stuff. Or The Craft, I think about how after The Craft came out in 97, there was a huge uptick in interest in Wicca and things like that.
Even Charmed. I think that a lot of Italians in the Wiccan community in the 2010s, they were, a lot of them would say, "Oh, I got interested because I watched Charmed."
Yeah.
Or Buffy.
Or Buffy, or I think even, I'm sure that we could probably trace out a good deal of our interest in terms of the media that we saw when we were kids. I certainly can. I definitely remember watching like the Leonard Nimoy show, In Search Of. It was like this great 1970s show about the Bermuda Triangle and stuff, and I was just fascinated by that. And I remember at some level seeing things about ghosts and UFOs or whatever, just being like, that's what I want to study. And then now it's my life. Less
I
ghosts
think
and UFOs.
for me was Buffy, the gateway drug. But I think I was interested even, regardless of that.
Yeah, Dan, do you remember your gateway drug into esotericism? Do you remember anything?
Christianity. Straight up.
Yeah. I think, yeah. I mean, I remember when I was a little, like looking through the Bible and being like, that doesn't make any, that's weird. Like how the Bible is such a strange text and what it doesn't say. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good example. Yeah. Like
who's the prince of the power of the air?
Yeah. What a weird, thing. Or like, Adam and Eve have these two kids, and then all of a sudden Cain goes off and he gets marked somehow and then marries someone. You're like, what the hell? Who is that?
I like how the mark is like a talisman. It's like it is a thing that is given to him that is like a protection symbol. And
it's meant to protect him.
Yeah.
And it's weird because the Bible also never records him dying. And that's the great grist for the mill for like vampire legends that Cain becomes the first vampire person, which I think is a great form of a great way of riffing on the mythology. Because that whole early section of the Bible is just about people living and dying. There's a long list of them, but Cain never is mentioned as having died, which is I don't know. That's a great stories in the Bible where that stuff happens.
Yeah, another one obviously is Lord of the Rings, which was huge for me. For me, it was a lot of things were forbidden, and so it was less being exposed to a lot of stuff than having those things shrouded and made more interesting by virtue of them being forbidden. And then stuff like Lord of the Rings definitely was huge for me. And then I think that so I was really into Lord of the Rings, and this was just before Harry Potter started coming out. And then, so when Harry Potter did start coming out, that was in my mind, it was like, oh, this is for little kids. And so it was weird, like, as you get older, like more and more people who are only 2 or 3 years younger than you, they all grew up with Harry Potter. And right. I was like, that was never on my radar.
Yeah, it's funny because even for me, I mean, a lot of my friends were really into Harry Potter, and I read it, but I don't know, it never really, I don't know.
It wasn't hardcore enough for you, Angela. You had
I think maybe it wasn't dark enough for me.
I'm gonna risk cancellation here. I tried multiple times to read The Lord of the Rings, and like even just last year I tried to read.
I'm gonna cancel you.
Done and done. I desperately tried to read it because it's a thing that I want to, but like I remember 160 pages are still in the Shire. I'm like,
that's what's so good about it.
Yeah, see, I know that
sublime.
I know everyone says that, but I'm like, but it's funny because this is like, again, it shows like the side of me that my personality. I love the Silmarillion. I can read the Silmarillion, and it's like I can read that over and over and over again. I love the Silmarillion, but man, like Tom Bombadil, and I'm like, what is this?
My favorite character.
It's just the most like it's just. I was like, what is happening in this?
I've never read the Lord of the Rings, but I want to.
All right, well, maybe we can make it a book club, Angela, and we can both slog through it.
But I have to admit that I also have your same perplexity, Justin, because I watched the movies and they are so slow.
I like the movies. I'm gonna get myself in trouble with this. Which again, I think it's like I'm gonna like lose my D&D chops. Sorry, Dan. We're just like torturing you with our.
It's okay. Go on.
But again, it's not like I love the Silmarillion. That's like I'm all about that Silmarillion life. But it's also the same part of me that's like I have a difficult time reading fiction in general, but I can tear through. I read the Iliad like every other year or something. So I think it's just a love I have of like epic poetry style stuff, and the Silmarillion feels like that in a way that the Lord of the Rings feels like little people walking through the grass for 2 4.5 years or something.
Justin, are you English at all in any way? Like
I don't think so. I think my people all come from like Poland, Lithuania.
Okay, because I'm English, and so maybe it like speaks to me on a different level. I'm not sure. Like maybe that's a load of nonsense, but I feel like it speaks to my like English soul, perhaps.
Yeah, I could see that. It's very pastoral in that way.
And just like, yeah, I mean, the Shire is this very idyllic idea of what like England, I don't know, ought to be. You know, not the dark satanic mills, but the what it should be. And I think the scouring of the Shire at the end of the Lord of the Rings is also kind of sort of like an end of that innocence.
Right. And that's left out of the movie.
Important part that they totally leave out of the movie.
Yeah, it's left out of the movie. I remember reading that. I flipped through a lot of it and remember like, oh yeah, it gets real dark at the end.
Oh, the end is so depressing.
Yeah, like people die and stuff after all of it. Yeah,
it ends with a whimper. Like the bang happens halfway through the middle of the third book. And then once the bang happens, it's just it kind of like peters out.
Right. Because all those orcs are still there.
Sad death.
Right, because like all those orcs are still there. A lot of them are. Like so I got some questions in super chat, so let's grab some of those. Thanks, Praveen. Thank you so much for the kind words. Dan Brown's a lost symbol. Have you guys ever read any Dan Brown?
No,
I haven't either. I think we're gonna lose our. He's like, I always think of Dan Brown as like the not thinking man's Umberto Eco.
I think that I've dreamt about it now that he was mentioned.
That's interesting. You've had it.
He gave lots of money to the Rittman libraries.
He did.
So, you know, I have nothing but good things to say about Dan Brown.
yeah, he did. He did give a lot of money to the Rittman. But I haven't read it. No, so Praveen, I haven't read it. In it, they talk about how the Divine Comedy was written in the vernacular. Yep. But I've not read it. It's the kind of basic esotericism stuff that I feel like many people have access to or to get into esotericism from things like Dan Brown or whatever, but I've never read this stuff. So I need to go back and do that. But thank you, Praveen, for the super chat. And
maybe you should do a collaboration on Dan Brown.
Yeah, I can invite Dan Brown to the channel. Maybe give me some money. All right. That's not going to happen, but it will be funny. Okay, I think we have another super chat that may be for Angela. Thank you. Could do a video on occult themes and tools music. Could do that.
I'd be down.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that actually because I was listening to Fear Inoculum making dinner the other night. So, and Dr. Puga,
have you interviewed Dr. Johnny Butler on my channel? Yes, there are 2 interviews with Jenny on my YouTube channel. So yeah, I recommend you check them out, and definitely I would I would love to have her back on. Jenny is really nice. She's a friend.
It was great meeting her at the conference as well. Yeah, that'd be interesting to do a thing on occult themes and tools music. Although we'd have to find some way of doing it in the most ironic way possible if we're to do it, Dan. Because I love how it's like occultism and then stuff about like penis jokes. It's just
it's goofy.
What?
Yeah, Tool is the best.
Tool is a penis joke.
Yeah, it's like literally a penis. Literally the name of it's a penis joke. But yeah, it's hilarious. Like it's randomly it's like real deep stuff like Platonic lyrics in like a Fibonacci sequence that is a penis joke.
Yes,
it somehow manages to be like high hermeticism and also in middle school at the same time.
Yeah. I'm more of a fan of the like Anima era. Lateralis was good. 10,000 Days was pretty good. And then the new album, I like some stuff on it, but like it feels like the B-sides of the 10,000 Days to me.
Yeah.
They took so long to come out with it. And I feel like there's a lot of other bands out there that are like doing just Tool, but more Tool, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that too. I think I think mine's favorite is probably Lateralis. Yeah. But that's less penis joke heavy, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's too serious. Well, a while Philip appears.
Oh, hi, Philip.
Hi, Philip. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Congratulations.
Thank you, Philip. Your volume's a little low, just FYI.
He's got the cursed Shure SM.
You all have fancy microphones, and I have these.
Hey,
I'm not using the fancy one right now.
Oh, okay.
I think the more fancy you have, the less it works somehow. The point of buying a really expensive microphone is for you to look at it. It's like an art
It's
piece.
narrower.
How you doing, Philip? Good evening. It must be relatively late there, but thanks for dropping by and hanging out.
Of course. I'm happy to celebrate your milestone.
Thank
I'm
you.
very happy for you. You definitely deserve it.
Thank you, Philip. This is funny because this is sort of like a pre-collaboration hangout.
Yes. Now that I think about it, it's we are all here.
We can go ahead and release our videos now. No, but it was a lot of fun working with you guys. It's just, I mean, again, one of the upticks of, or one of the great things about doing this is just the community that we've built up in terms of our friendships and our ability to work together. It's so wonderful because it does so much to undo the other stuff that Angela and I were talking about before we signed on, which is all of the crazy side of things that can occur from the back door.
Yeah, we should tell each other what are the craziest comments that we get.
Oh, Philip has the best one.
Can you share?
What the when you got accused of being
All right, yes, I was accused of being an agent for the PKK at one point.
What?
This is great.
If you have a camera and you have a microphone, obviously you're being paid by somebody to put stuff on the internet.
Right.
There's no way that you could possibly do that of your own volition.
Actually, yesterday I also got a comment who thought I was an agent for MI6 too. So I'm working all across.
Double dipping.
Yeah, really working for all of the intelligence agencies. Yeah, I get the obligatory like anti-Semitism, like this is just a Mossad front, and this is just the Jews using occultism to corrupt the world, which is a pretty consistent one I get. Unfortunately, I don't get my Jewish conspiracy theory check every month, where we, my dividends on the controlling Hollywood or the music industry or whatever. So unfortunately, I missed that check, but I had to deal with like some crazy anti-Semitism stuff this week, unfortunately. But yeah, it's just like par for the course. But Angela has the most predictable problem one can imagine.
Yes, I get a lot of misogyny or random marriage proposals. Apparently, I think the funniest one was somebody that was actually laying out, our future together. Saying where our kids would go to school and things like that. Like what?
That's really
very romantic.
Yeah. It's that line that like when you cross the line from like thoughtfulness to creepy. Yeah, that's really troubling.
Yeah, and of course I get a lot of comments on my appearance. You can imagine.
Yeah. Dan, any of your fun internet experiences with people thinking you're crazy?
None. Maybe not none, but none that have like stuck in my memory, which is telling in a way. There are things that people say to me, but to me they're just like things that people would say to anybody. They're not specific things. Like nobody comments on my appearance because I don't appear. I am never on camera because I feel like that just takes way too much time for me, at least.
I think you've been on camera more on my channel than on your channel somehow.
Absolutely. Yeah. But other than that, like, I don't know. No, I mean, unless it's like I stuck my neck out and said something political, which I don't really do much anymore because it's like as your platform grows, I become less and less like those things become personal. And then it's sort of like I have nothing really to say. So then nobody's really attacking me about my appearance or my politics, my gender, my race. Like I'm English and white. So what are they going to say about that? I mean, I get people who perhaps say that if I'm not X thing, I should not be speaking about such and such a thing. which that's sort of like, okay, well then nobody can talk. I don't know. It doesn't ever work the other way around, where it's like, I am a master of English and nobody can speak English or talk about English to me because I have nothing to learn because I'm English. That doesn't happen. So yeah, I don't get much of that. And I suppose if I do, I just like block it or delete it, and then I kind of just forget about it because it doesn't sting me in any of my vital parts, which I suppose is a good thing, but also it's telling of other bad things when everybody around you is having all these specific negative experiences, and I'm like, I don't get that.
Yeah, for me, I think it's a bit upsetting when I get comments of people questioning whether I actually have a PhD because I'm young, because of my appearance, because apparently I don't look like an academic or somebody who has a PhD, which I guess it's an old white man. I don't know what people have in mind, but
I don't know what people have in mind because, like, having been in academia for, I guess, a decade now, there's no look anymore. There might have been in the past, and it was, as you say, an old white dude, but like that hasn't been the case since, I don't know, 30 years ago.
Even the 60s and stuff. I think that like the professor in tweed or whatever, that was a thing like at a point, but yeah.
I'm trying to bring it back, though, to be honest. The tweed look, not the
hey, I'm about it. I'm about it. When when you live in a place like Philip does, or it makes sense to be wearing a tweed or whatever.
Do you have swords too in Sweden? I have a vague memory of a scholar from Sweden that said something about, because we were talking earlier about how it works with graduation, doctoral graduation, and I was wondering how it worked in Sweden. Is it similar to Finland?
I didn't catch your question. Yes, Angela?
Could you not hear me?
No, I couldn't really. I didn't know. I didn't hear you properly.
Okay, so earlier we were talking about the PhD graduations and how it varies from country to country. And then Justin were saying that in Finland they have swords, and so that's the coolest. And I had a vague memory. There was a scholar from Finland, Per Faxneld. He was telling me how it works in Sweden, and I remember something similar. I don't think that there was an actual sword, but
no, we don't have swords.
Okay.
I mean, Pat is pretty. He likes the extravagant stuff, and he also wears tweed suits a lot of the time, I think. But no, usually it's very low key. There's a defense, and then the person who has been defending his dissertation or her dissertation basically throws a party afterwards.
Okay.
And ceremony, as far as I know, maybe I've missed it, but I haven't seen any swords.
I can imagine in Sweden and Norway you would get like axes. If it just seemed like that would be the more
fishing net or something is more
the more ceremonial weapon, or but I wonder why. I mean, do you guys know about the history of academic maces, like where that came from, or academic flails? Like on the cover of Leviathan, right? Like the Leviathan holds both the sword and the flail, and it represents both military power and intellectual power. And that the image of the flail or the mace is like still an academic symbol.
That goes back to Pharaoh, and it was a threshing thing, right? If I'm not mistaken, it was to beat grain, and so it was a symbol of agriculture and power. So you have I think it was a mace and a crook, if I'm not mistaken. So the crook is for the shepherding part, and the mace, perhaps, I think, was military, but also had agricultural associations with it as well. But how that got associated with academics, I have no idea.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I have this. I should check it out. I have this this great like 6-volume history of the university in Europe, which is like really, really. It's like from the early 20th century, and it's a really, really cool thing on just the history of how universities developed and like the craziness that was the University of Paris. Like I don't have a lot of interest in time traveling, but man, I would have loved to have seen the University of Paris in like, you know, the 1270s, like right on the edge of the condemnation, because it must have just been a riot.
Literally.
Oh yeah, like the first instance of the University of Paris ever being recorded is because a tavern owner sued it because the students there kept killing people. Like the the Goliards and all this, like they have to like constantly have these like condemnations of the university. Again, it's just the kind of thing that would make a great backdrop for a movie. It's like the University of Paris in 1277.
People summoning demons, other people stopping them.
Right.
Just to cheat on your test, like
like
doing this extremely elaborate ritual so that I don't have to like sit down and memorize multiplication tables or something.
Right. Yeah, it would be a great backdrop. We grab this super chat. Saint Trina. Esotericism in video games. Yeah, I'm all about. Yeah, I would love to see. You're welcome to send it over. I'd love to see it. This is something I would love to focus on. And Philip, you've mentioned this too, especially around the Assassin's Creed stuff, with how they recreate these worlds that are really, really so vivid and that they can be used for educational purposes. This is something I'd love to focus on. I don't know. And Andrew focuses on this a little bit on his channel, sort of religion video games. But I think it would be really cool to do an esotericism in video games.
Yeah.
I'm planning on making a video on D&D, Dungeons and Dragons.
Awesome.
We should all collab on that. I think we can all.
I was thinking of doing something like that, and then I told the idea to Justin. He's like, I don't know about that. You might get your whole thing demonetized, and you were totally right. So I didn't
you wanted to do it on the Book of Vile Darkness, though. The single, like, it's so like controversial. It's not even reprinted. It's like that one and the original Monsters Manual. They ripped off all the Cthulhu stuff and they got sued. So like, I was like, that is not going to work. It's like the most vile stuff ever.
Yes, I took your advice kindly, and I'm glad that I did, because it saved me a lot of time.
I would love to do one on D&D or video games in general.
I should say what the idea was. It was to basically do like cover the history of the Book of Vile Darkness within the context of Satanic Panic, and then switch to something like, but what is the real Book of Vile Darkness? And to explore some rituals like the Liberwakai, the Book of the Cow, and things like that, and explore some of the really nasty magical rituals that there are, like stuff in the Peakatrix. But then I realized, it would probably get demonetized real fast. Like you would ding up the algorithm with all of the heinous words, and then it would just
like the rampant animal abuse.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, Angela, when you win and if you do the D&D one, let me know. I'd love to. Dan too. I bet we're as lifetime D&D people. Like I'm literally looking at all my books over there. They have the new Spelljammer out.
Yeah, I have a famous D&D person that is a subscriber of my channel, Matthew Mercer, and he also posted about my YouTube channel on the Critical Role newsletter. There's a colleague of mine. She's now left Leeds. She's teaching at Cambridge now, but she's a big D&D player, and so she basically sent me because I'm not in the newsletter, Critical Role newsletter, but she sent me like the screenshot, and she said, "Oh, I saw your channel."
That's great.
He recommended it. So I think that I would also give him a shout out in the video.
Angela, Philip, have you guys ever played Dungeons and Dragons?
No.
Actually, no, I haven't. I always wanted to, but there's never been an opportunity.
Well, this is a good excuse to start. We could do like a YouTube esotericist religious studies
a
Twitch
D&D party,
a D&D Twitch, and I do think that people would tune in.
I'm down.
Yeah,
first, but no.
We have to see who we wanted to DM, but I would do it. I would DM. I love
That's
DMing.
the challenge. It's
I mean,
always the
I
challenge.
volunteer. I volunteer to DM if we ever did it. And there's so much good stuff out. Yeah, like I said, they have the new Spelljammer out, which is like the most 80s and wonderful of all the D&D things. I don't know. It's like D&D in space. It's great.
I always wanted to run a D&D campaign that was like DMT trip inspired D&D. So it's just like, I don't know, you're like in a white room and then all of a sudden like you use different stats for like opening portals and going into different rooms, and you know, you could wind up in a McDonald's like ball pit with Ronald McDonald trying to kill you, and then all of a sudden you're in some celestial god's court, or you know, just hopping through planes, but in a very psychedelic kind of way, not kind of like the way that they do it in planes. What is it?
Planescape.
Yeah, Planescape, where there's like sigil and you actually have to like get to one pocket plane to another through some sort of physical medium. This would just be like, no, you failed your will save and you just get sucked into another dimension, and it's happening like all the time.
That sounds really terrifying. DMT and D&D.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds really scary. But I don't know. It's an idea. I don't know if it'd be fun to even if it just were a one-off to just like do a D&D game and invite all of our friends. I don't know, because like I said, I have all the books over there. I even have the books I grew up with, which was a lot of fun. I still have my like second edition stuff. I don't know, Dan, if you grew up on second edition, but like the amount of tables I have memorized for kicking in doors. It's just like, man, if I wish I could store grammar or something where those tables are stored in my mind.
When I started, it was third edition, like before 3.5. And so I was like just on the cusp where I could look back and see what people were dealing with like FACO and all of that stuff. And I was like, no, thank you. Yeah, this looks much more streamlined.
The D20 systems. I mean, as much as I will pine for the old days, the D20 system is far better. Let me grab another super chat. Thank you for this dude. Plans to cover the works of Edward Williams, aka Lolo Morganwig, considering its impact on modern Druidry and Welsh cultural institutions. I don't even know who that is.
Me neither.
I'm not familiar either.
That's interesting.
I know John Michael Greer just put out a talk on Hermetics about Druidry like the other day. And so there was that. That was interesting. And he said a lot of things that I didn't expect him to say. Like, he's just like, yeah, Druidry as it is today is like a modern thing. And like, it's not connected to the like ancient. It's largely reconstructed, and nobody's claiming that there's an unbroken lineage, or if they are, like nobody takes them very seriously and all that. And we have no idea what the Druids were like. Like, we know far less than we think that we know. So his talk was very good, and I recommend that.
Yeah, I have to check that out. Yeah, it seems like, Angela, that would be also in your wheelhouse, to at least contemporary Druidry.
Yeah, although I've never researched Druidry specifically, but being in pagan studies, I have lots of colleagues that work on Druidry, including my former PhD supervisor, and Jennifer Razell, who's also been on my YouTube channel being interviewed. But yeah, I think one thing that is interesting about pagans, Druids and Wiccans and, all of those that in a way classify as pagans, is that they tend to be quite susceptible to what history and academic studies discover or say. So, for instance, that in the early days, in Wicca had a kind of claim that we were coming from this unbroken lineage of witch cult in Europe based on Margaret Murray's writings. But then after that was disproven, they have in a way updated their belief system. So I think that's one of the interesting things about paganism, that is not really hung up on certain dogmatic beliefs, even about the history of their own tradition. It tends to be very experiential and very practical. So when something comes up in terms of new research or history or anthropology of religion that proves something different from what they thought up until that point, they have no problem just, updating that kind of information, because what really matters is the experience, is the underlying experience that they have. And usually it is connection to nature or connection to, there are some aspects that are denominators across pagan religions. And actually now I'm working on a book on pagan religions for Equinox with my former supervisor, Susan Owen. And we are gathering pagan studies scholars to answer questions. Because it's a book called Pagan Religions in 5 Minutes, because Equinox has a series called Religions in 5 Minutes, where you have lots of questions and they will need to be answered in 500 words, so that the reader will basically have an answer within 5 minutes, the time that is needed to read around 500 words. So we were trying to collect all the kind of questions that people may have on paganism. I think that's another one we should add to the list.
Druidry, yeah.
Well, Druidry, is of course there, but I mean how the formation of belief system works and is updated in a way in paganism. I think that it tends to be a bit different in other religions.
Right. I can imagine that many of the people who become pagans are also people who got burned on dogmatic religions, and so
pagans are very anti-dogmatic, definitely.
Greer talked about this and said, and he gave a lay of the land of what the options for religions were in England at the time that Druidry made a real comeback. And he's like, it's no surprise that it made a comeback, because it was just like Anglicanism and these kinds of things that you had to choose from. And so he's like, there were no options that were like, go out into the woods and venerate nature and things like that. So if Druidry didn't exist, somebody had to invent it in order to create that alternative path. It was like, so what do you do? It's like anything that you guys aren't doing is basically how it came about.
Yeah, this is an interesting question from First Owl. Thank you. So first I'll ask, do you find this occult online community acts like peer review? This is an interesting thing that we can sort of expand it and ask all of y'all. We don't have peer review so much among each other in the sense that there is no peer review on YouTube. You can put completely insane things and say whatever you like. But what do you think? How do you think that? What are some of the emergent features for how you think it's going on amongst us? And
I don't think. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say that. I mean, one of the main things that I know of when I think about when I'm making content is that I know that people like y'all are watching it, and I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to. Yeah, and so I have
that's more peer pressure than peer review, though.
It's true, but
educated peer pressure.
Right. But it's sort of like that. Like I know that. I really don't want to have to take a video down and have to edit something after it goes up because someone's like, yeah, you're like methodologically way off or whatever. I don't know. That's going on. Like I not when I'm writing, I have 6 sets of imaginary eyes on what I'm writing, and such that I try not to make those kinds of mistakes because I don't want to look bad. But
yeah.
So I think that there is that element. I think that in a way we make each other stronger in that respect. But I think that the peer review system is completely different. First of all, the peer review works anonymously. So the people that are going to review your work are not people that know you, because there may be biases that may come into play. And also it's not always the same people. It tends to be people from all over the world and that are expert in your specific field. That's another thing. I think that we have different expertise, and somebody that would have to peer review, for instance, my videos, would have to be an expert in my field and should do it anonymously, and even my work would have to be anonymous, and obviously since there's my face on it, it's not going to be anonymous. So I think that it is different, although of course, you know, having a community of other content creators that are academically inclined or that, you know, deliver academic content, I think is important, because it allows each other to improve, because we can give each other feedback. But I would see that more as feedback rather than peer review, because the peer review works very differently.
No, I agree. I mean, there's definitely a difference there. But I also agree with Justin, is that when I'm writing and when I'm making a video, depending on the subject that I'm writing about, I might also be thinking of particular people in this community. Like if I'm writing about paganism, I'm like, oh man, is Angela gonna whatever. So I think that's a really cool aspect of this community, that we can sort of help each other improve in that way.
I agree.
Yeah,
And
it's
Dan,
not
what-
double blind, but there are comment sections, so it's a forum, and people can, you know, timestamp your arguments and tell you you're wrong. And in that way, like, that's great. You pray for those kinds of comments. Not that you're wrong, but that, like, instead of it's like you're an idiot and you don't know what you're talking about, but like, here and here you said this and this, but actually, like, here's this source that contradicts this. If you get one of those, that's awesome.
It means people are listening to you.
Yeah, and I welcome that. But it's not the same as peer review. And also, when it's, as you say, when you're writing, there's writing edutainment, which is, and then there's writing just the facts, or just the, maybe not just the facts, but just the description and analysis. Whereas I find when I do edutainment, there's very little analysis. It's mostly descriptive, because like a lot of the stuff, like you can only be a specialist on a very narrow area of things. Like my analysis is only valuable in a very narrow area of things, whereas my description is as good as any. And you can go on and describe stuff all day long, and if you make it do it in an entertaining way, people will be attracted to that. But I think that is one of the main differences between academic and non-academic writing, is that academic writing is a balance of descriptive and analytical, whereas like edutainment is a balance of description and entertainment, which is like jokes and puns and it's like,
that
I made a
humor
Roger
in Justin's case.
Yeah, like using memes. I made a video a while ago on Roger Bacon, and it was called "The Man Who Hated the Antichrist," which was like riffing off of this popular "I hate the Antichrist" meme that is going around. And so people like that, they caught on to it, and it played into it. But that's never something that I would write like an academic paper using this "I hate the Antichrist" meme. Yeah, so that really is the difference.
Yeah, I think that you raised another important point, and that is that when it comes to academic peer-reviewed material, you only really write about something that you are hyper specialized in, whereas on YouTube we tend to be a bit more, I mean, we have a kind of a narrow area, but even though I think that people sometimes don't realize that in academia you would have that a scholar would be specialized only in one of the, you know, the subjects that we treat in one of our videos, for instance. But yeah, I think that both things are valuable and important and complementary, because people are not just going to go and read an academic paper, but if you whet their appetite with something that is educational and entertaining, then they might very well do that and get interested in how academics talk about those kind of things. So I think that the two are both important, they are different, and they can be complementary and work in each other's favor.
Yeah, and one acts as like a scaffolding for the other, because it's you can't just jump into really specific analytical stuff. You have to have this like broad general framework of things to hang your, you know, pegs to hang your hat on. And I think that's why they complement each other really well, is because one creates a scaffolding and then the other one puts the flesh on the skeleton, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, I think, at least for me, when I'm trying to write for my audience, I'm basically trying to peg it somewhere at an upper undergraduate level of depth, right? Like, and so that's basically the level I'm trying to peg things at. Is someone who's like already majored in religious studies or philosophy, and is interested in it, but wants to get into something a little bit further. But yeah, I think that if we were pegging things at a graduate school level, our content would look very, very different. Also, I don't think we'd have much of an audience.
No.
So, but let me grab this one right here, the super chat. So months ago, we showed a book on early Israelite rulers and early Yahwism. You said it was a dense one. Do you remember its title? I got a lot of books on Yahweh. He seems to bother me constantly. It was probably The Early History of God by Smith. I bet that was what it was. Probably The Early History of God by Smith. That would be. That's a good one, by the way. It is a little dense. It could have been Tribes of Yahweh, maybe, but probably the Grunwald piece, which is really great. But I think it's that. Maybe also the Origins of Biblical Monotheism, which is also by Smith, which are kind of variations of the same book. It may have been that one, but I don't know. I don't know. Marco Visconti. Hey, Marco. Many of us know Marco. Hi, Marco. Thank you for the congratulations, and it's good to have you in the chat.
Ciao, Marco.
There you go. Someone you can speak Italian with.
Yes.
It was funny watching you guys do an interview in English, and I'm like,
yeah, but you didn't see there were parts that were cut out of the interview because we were talking in Italian.
the Italian outtakes. That would. Welcome, Marco. Thank you for dropping in the chat.
I actually did an interview with my old professor the other day here in Sweden, and we were speaking English for the interview, which was really weird because we're both Swedish.
Yeah, I think it is bizarre when you're from same country, same native language, but you have to speak in English for.
It's a funny thing. Yeah, thank you, Teeny Dakini. Thank you for the super thanks. Yeah, good Shabbos. We'll be Shabbos soon. I was going to say something funny about a book I got recently. I like to do a cult show and tell about old books. This is a neat little book. It has a cool little history. This is a French translation of Nicholas Emmerich's Directorium Inquisitorum. It's like one of the most important inquisitorial. I think it was, aside from Bernard Guy, it was the earliest of the inquisitorial manuals. But what's neat about this one, it's obviously not a complete translation because the Directorium Inquisitorum is like 800 pages long. So this is an abridgment made in French in 1762. But what's neat about this one, the reason why I got it, is because have you guys read The Fall of the House of Usher? The Edgar Allan Poe story? It's the best Edgar Allan Poe story, The Fall of the House of Usher. Angela, you remember the scene where he's describing all the books they like to read, and there's all those weird books by Machiavelli, and at any rate, one of those books he says is that they like to read Directorium Inquisitorum by Emmerich, and it even says in The Fall of the House of Usher they were reading it in an octavo edition. There's no way there was ever an octavo edition of the Directorium Inquisitorum because it's too long to be bound in an octavo size. It would only be possible in a folio size. But what's interesting is that this must have been what Poe was talking about, because this is an octavo, and this is the book he must have had in mind.
Oh, so that's really cool.
So it's a neat piece of history because, one, it's like a cool abridgment in French. Also, it was owned by the last, the bookmark. I'm not sure if I'll be able to show it on camera. But the book stamp, which is kind of neat, is from the last yeshiva in Portugal. So this was in the library of the last yeshiva to close in Portugal before it obviously entered private hands. So it's kind of neat in that way.
So do you know how they make that swirly binding pattern? Is it just dipping it in ink, or?
Yeah, there's like they have like a viscous solution, and they pour colors into it and like mix it around, and then they just literally put the the paper on top of it and do it. You can in Venice, you can see all kinds of places where they do this, and they make those. It's called paper marbling. So, but anyway, a neat little show and tell piece of like history, because I picked this up and I wanted it because it's actually the mistake version of in Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher.
That's cool.
But yeah, I want to get the actual Directorium Inquisitorum. Dan, I was going to get that copy of Ficino's. I was telling you about that copy of Ficino with the Vatican imprint. I almost got it until I was looking through more of the pictures. The guy had it for sale, and it was missing 14 pages, and so he didn't realize it. So it wasn't really worth it in the end. But he
didn't realize it, or he took them out.
Yeah, he took them out. It's funny because they're not even in the cool parts of on life. They're not from part 3. They're from, and it could have been a printer's error where they just weren't ever bound originally in the book. But
right.
But it was cool because it was a copy that was held in the Vatican Library at some point, and it was excised as a duplicate. But,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to leave now.
yeah, it's late where you are.
Yeah, but congratulations again, Justin. And it was really fun hanging out with you guys, and I hope to do that again soon.
Yeah, we should do it and maybe do D&D together. That'd be fun. But
absolutely, count me in.
Okay.
See you, Angela.
See you, Angela. Have a good night. See you on Sunday. But yeah, I don't know. Rare book collecting. It's a lot of fun to get these old books.
It's like Pokemon cards for adults.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, you get to have these like cool old books, and I do want to get a copy of Directorium Inquisitorum, just because I love these. I want to collect the Inquisitors manuals. They're just so horrifying, and I don't know, they're such interesting books.
Speaking of books, I've told you, Justin, I've been reading the Shams al-Ma'arif lately because I'm working on a video about it. And I actually had a kind of spooky experience like a few weeks ago.
So and everyone on TikTok who reads that book.
I was reading the book before going to sleep, basically. And then for some reason, one night I was having really strange, bad dreams and like waking up and just like not sleeping well. And I woke up from one of those dreams and realized that I had my hand placed on the book while I was sleeping. And I was like, oh, shit.
That is there you go. That's a danger. It's an occupational. This is an occupational hazard, you know.
Yeah.
We surround ourselves, and Philip, you're like really in it deep because you're like reading the Meccan Revelations and everything. I don't know, man. You need to be careful.
I mean, that one isn't cursed as far as I know, but the Shams al-Ma'arif seems
Is it supposed to be? Is it supposed to be cursed?
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. I didn't know that about a curse. One of the comments I get actually from on the channel is is it safe for people to have books like this? And I'm like, I don't know, man. Like I got a lot of books like this.
Just get a Sefer Raziel in your house.
It's true.
And then you counter all the bad stuff.
So, well, it only counters fire though.
Fire, but that's like the worst thing that could happen.
That's true. In a house full of books. Have you guys seen these little amulets that I have where you can get all of Sefer Raziel on like one? Here, let me show you. This is hilarious.
Oh, cool.
Assuming I have it in here, I think I do. I don't have the Sefer Raziel's downstairs, but so if you ever find yourself in like a Haredi bookstore, because as you do
every day,
every door, you can go usually to the front, and they'll have these amulet-sized copies of Sefer Raziel. So this is like the entire book, but printed like in a little vinyl cover, but it's printed super, super small, and it's only meant to be an amulet. And so this is like an amulet edition of Sefer Raziel that you can buy. But even crazier than that is this. This is, let me see if I can get it open quickly without messing it up. Yeah. This is even crazier. You can buy an entire microfilm of the Zohar.
Awesome.
which is
That's
also
the
an amulet.
coolest thing I've ever seen.
It's a tiny little copy of and it comes in its own special case, and it comes in its own special box.
But I mean, it's not the whole thing, right? Is it?
It's the whole thing. It's the entire 3-volume standard edition of the Sefer Zohar on microfilm, and this is considered to have the same power as the actual like book. And so just having this in your house is sufficient to have all the magical powers that one has. Yeah. And it even tells you like these are the magical powers the book gets. It's obviously in Hebrew or whatever, but it tells you like all the stuff that that you'll get along the way. You'll get hatzlacha, you'll have success and health and yeah, all the things. So this is a whole like little cottage industry in the Jewish world of like book amulets printed on microfilm.
There's on the back of the Picatrix, the Pingree edition, there's his 1,500 page apparatus criticus in microfiche that is like significantly bigger than the text itself. And it would be awesome to somehow condense that down into an amulet and carry it around.
That's hilarious. But yeah, have you guys ever known about these microfilm amulet?
No.
Nope.
It's such a bizarre, it's like the most Jewish thing ever. Like how to get magical books so small that you can just literally keep them in your house. And it's interesting because halakhically, legally, they have to be readable, and it doesn't have to be readable as such. It just has to be readable in theory. And so the microfilm is like at least readable in theory, so you can like go take it to a library from the 1960s and.
So the Sefer Raziel it's not a mezuzah, is it? Like you wouldn't nail it on your door, or you just have it in your house.
Most people put it in the rafters of their house. So they throw it in the attic.
Okay.
But like I have a copy from the 19th century, but this is like the little amulet copy. Let me see if I can open it real fast because this at least in principle this is supposed to be readable. But you can have it. Yeah, you can have it like lying around. Let me open it up, but you can just see how like absolutely tiny the text is.
Nice.
But you have the little famous amulets in the back too. Like I'm sure everyone's seen like these like great segulot, kameot. Awesome. But yeah, that's like super tiny little amulet book.
I have a similar thing here actually with the Quran.
Oh yeah.
My father-in-law's originally, or mother-in-law, I think. So it's like a really beautiful thing that you hang wherever. We have it in our living room currently. And then inside, I need to be careful with this one. Inside is this tiny Quran.
Yeah, because I've seen those when I was in Egypt. They a lot of the taxi drivers would have these little Qurans just like hanging from their rear view mirror.
Yeah.
Wow. Is it handwritten or is it just like an old a print?
No, it's a print, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the art of little bookmaking. And people, I mean, that's another thing I think people don't really realize about old books, especially if you get into working with manuscripts, how little the script is. I mean, in a standard Bible of the 13th century, if you were buying, if you could get one of the ones that was made just the entire Bible in one edition, I mean, the writing there is about 1 millimeter tall. It is incredibly small when you see them up close, and one wonders how they even could see that. I mean, that's also when they invented spectacles, and so they must have been using spectacles to write it as much as to read it.
This reminds me of when I was in high school and the teacher would say something like, okay, you can all have a cheat sheet, but you can only put it on this card. And so everybody was like, oh, okay. So they're writing in the smallest little thing they could possibly do to like have their cheat sheets. And he's like, okay, now you won't even need your cheat sheet because all that time that you spent making the cheat sheet, you'll be able to just convey that information onto the test. And then everybody will have studied at that point, which is a great technique for teaching.
It's funny because I'm looking over. I mean, I don't know how the PhD worked for you, Dan, but at least in philosophy, we had qualifying and then comprehensive exams.
Mm-hmm.
And the qualifying exam in philosophy they were both history exams. So you were you were basically put in front of a computer. You weren't allowed to use the internet, and you were just asked questions, and you had to answer them cold with no notes.
Mm-hmm.
In order to like get ready, we would basically go through all of the previous iterations of these exams. And I have basically that version of a qualifying exam cheat sheet for modern philosophy, like right there, which is like the tiniest cramped writing going through like Kant and Hume and Spinoza. So I know I love that stuff.
For me, it was read everything in the classical tradition. Like they're like, here's the list of works that could be on your Latin exam, and then they like give you like every extant Latin text.
Just go.
That
yeah,
isn't
like,
fragmentary, basically.
Right. Your exam will be taken from the Loeb Classical Library.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah. Go forth and read. Yeah, that's. Yeah, I do not look back on any of that stuff with any nostalgia. Ugh. Or the graduate student exams and stuff. Philip, is there like a in Sweden, is there like a exam, like a test that you have to take before applying to graduate school? Like here we have the GRE.
Just we apply. It's like applying for a job, basically. So you present a project idea and a plan for your 5 years of work, and then the school will, or the institution will decide whether or not they will hire you.
Yeah, that's much more rational than.
So it's a lot more. It's based a lot more on your actual idea and the strength of your proposal, I guess.
Yeah. Dan, do you guys have to do the GRE up there?
I did, because I went to UCLA for 2 years, or 1 year, sorry. But I was also trying to get into graduate school in the States, so I had to do it, and I did well, but like competition is fierce, and I'm not a numerically or mathematically inclined person. You know, I have no reason to be. All my interests are artistic, music, design, like communication, all of these things, nothing number based or anything like that. So that's a big component of it, and I did not do well on that part.
Right.
But I did well on the verbal and the other score. I forget which. There were 3 scores.
Right. And they eliminated one recently, I think.
Oh, did they? Okay.
Something.
They should eliminate the whole thing. It's all just like for profit anyways.
Yeah, it's a total. Yeah, I really don't at all. Yeah, I remember like taking it and thinking this has nothing to do with what I'm going to be working on.
Nope.
It's just it's basically a weeder.
It's a filter.
It's a filter. It's
a class filter, like realistically.
Right. Yeah.
It's like who can afford the GRE tutors or the LSAT tutors or the whatever kind of standardized test tutors, who can buy the books, who can even, and then there are like courses and people who their whole thing is like preparing you for that thing. And some people can afford those tutors and some people can't. And it isn't to say that the people who spend money are going to do best, but it's like, it does give you a big advantage.
Definitely. Yeah. All these the test taking industry. Yeah. I've never, the GRE. Ugh. Yeah. I like the real rational way. You know, the Northern Europeans, leave it to them to do things rationally.
Yep. We have it all figured out.
Everything's figured out over there. No, I hated that thing. Philip, how's the Meccan Revelations going?
Not very good. We've been pausing for a few weeks now. I've been for the rest of you who haven't spoken to this about this before. I'm currently making my way through the Meccan Revelations in translation by Eric Winkle with my wife, actually. So we're reading it together, which is really nice, but it's really difficult. And I've read parts of it before, but we're actually trying to read it, which is probably not how you should read it, but we're reading it like from chapter 1 and then just in the way that it's presented. It's a baffling text and huge.
It's like how many volumes did you say it's gonna go into in the English translation?
I think the plan is there's gonna be 19 volumes of like 600 pages each. I would assume something like that.
Yeah.
The original is like 10,000 pages in Arabic.
What a huge. It'd be interesting to make a list of these kinds of incredibly difficult religious works, like everything from the Zohar, the Meccan Revelations, like the poetry of William Blake. Yeah, just there's something about not just weird texts, because anyone can churn out like a short, like a Sefer Yetzirah is weird, but anyone could churn that out. It's like 2,000 words.
Yeah,
it's when you churn out, 15 volumes of like, I don't know, like Swedenborg and stuff. It's when you can churn that stuff out, or Jakob Böhme,
Blavatsky.
Like, oh God,
I actually went through the entire Secret Doctrine, and holy moly, is it long?
Yeah, that thing is huge. It's like a brick. There's something about that kind of graphomania that I don't know. I'm especially interested in. Like, any favorite texts like that? Super long ones like that? Any other ones you can think of?
I mean, there's so many of them.
Yeah.
But specifically religious texts that are like super voluminous. I don't know. Do I have any here?
I'm thinking like,
but I like the concept of the Zohar. I think it's a really fascinating text.
Yeah,
I need to read it at some point because I actually haven't.
It's a pain. I mean,
I feel like Judaism has a lot of that, like Zohar and Talmud, and you have all of these different like huge compendiums, because it's like a culture that is very book oriented and like rewards that learnedness in a way that other people, I think of like the Tao Te Ching as being like the complete opposite, where it's just like just writing it out quickly, and that's the myth behind the text, that he just wrote it off and then threw it away, and that was that, and here's my doctrine, if you will.
I guess medieval Christianity produced these kinds of texts too.
Yes.
I mean, I think about like the
glossae.
Yeah, like all those long texts on Peter Lombard's sentences that no one reads.
Yes.
Which again, this is another book that like had one of the most decisive impacts in intellectual history that no one reads anymore. Like the Peter Lombard sentences. Like everyone had to write a commentary on it basically to graduate college. And most of the major theological works that come out of the Middle Ages are basically commentaries on the sentences.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of these books that I think in many ways I've never read it.
No.
Like I've read chunks of it. But
Nicholas of Lyra comes to mind as like, you have the Glossa Ordinaria, and then you have the Postilla, and they're just both massive commentaries on the Bible, on the four measures of Scripture, like so you have the literal, the analogical, the tropological or moral, and then the mystical. And although he doesn't see them as like four consecutive things, he sees it as like you have the literal, and then you have the analogical, and then that branches off into three parts, which is the moral, the mystical, and the and just like one thing signifying another analogical, like concordances, if you will. So there's a lot of that stuff, but I don't know. I feel like we live in an era that is kind of, we can just Google any passage we want and find like 100 commentaries. So we don't need that kind of stuff anymore. Not to say that the wisdom of Nicholas of Lyra is not for our age, but that you should be able to like find hundreds of commentaries on a specific verse. Whereas this is like, you would crack it open if you were, let's say you're a preacher and you're trying to write a sermon, and you're like, I need to know, I'm preaching on, Matthew 3:4. And then you're like, I'm going to look up what Nicholas of Lyra has said about that. And then Nicholas of Lyra is commenting on, David Kimmey and all of these, like he himself is responding to and reacting to all of this rabbinical literature. It's just this huge mountain of stuff. And we're fortunate that the internet just allows us to look up all of that stuff quickly without having to have these mountain tall tomes sitting around to be on reference.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is probably will be a reflection of my own religious background, but I do think we would benefit from writing new commentaries on text. Like the commentary tradition, I think, is a really rich tradition. And it's one thing that actually I get people kind of like throwing shade on, where I'll talk about like, oh yeah, this is a super commentary. It's a commentary on a commentary. and which is a very common thing in Judaism. There are like hyper meta commentaries on the Talmud, like a commentary on Ibn Ezra's commentary on, which is the Talmud is a commentary on the Mishnah. Like people like, commentaries are, there's still this weird, I think, Protestant hangover that commentary literature is like pedantic, and they even use the word scholastic as a kind of slur.
It's a humanist thing.
Yeah, and I find it to be like I think, if all of us, like if we were to get all of our little clique together to take a text and just like have the text in the middle and then have 4 different scholars commentaries on the text, like I would read things. I would absolutely read things like that. If there were like a copy of the Corpus Hermeticum that had like Hanegraaff and Copenhaver and all that stuff like laid out like the Talmud on one page, just going line by line, I would buy that. I would certainly read that.
So that's what I'm working on right now, is like the Glossae Super Trismegistum, which is the commentary on the Asclepius from the Middle Ages. And that one is decent. Not everything that is mentioned is particularly good or insightful. And it tells us more about the people writing the commentary than it does tell us about the Asclepius, right? Like, so there's that. But then there's also, in this collection that we're working on, the Book of 24 Philosophers and its 2 commentaries. And those commentaries are garbage. They are absolute trash. They say nothing. And like, I'm almost like, why are we translating this? No. Because it's just like, it feels like notes of a second-rate student copied by a third-rate student.
It could have. And also the Book of 24 Philosophers has such weird stuff in there.
Oh, and the Latin in that is sometimes unintelligible. Like you have to, like we just try to cling to what the Latin says closely because sometimes it's broken. And you just like, okay, what did the author mean? I don't know. The verdict isn't even out if this text was written in the 2nd century or the 12th century. That's how messed up this text is. Like, there's 2 scholarly traditions about this text, and the origins for it are 1,000 years apart.
Yeah,
just I don't know any other text that's like that.
Yeah, it's a mess. It's really a mess of a text. Yeah. Another book, I don't know, Dan, I would love to cover with you at some point is the Liber de Causis. That would be a great text to work through at some point. But Philip, do you ever work much with like Tafsir? Do you ever read much in the way of Tafsir literature?
Not much, no.
Is much of that stuff translated to English?
No, I think that's the thing. There are a few ones, like the big ones. There's the famous Tafsir by Arazi. And there's one also by, what's his name? Al-Farghani, who was a student of Ibn Arabi. I think it's called like a Sufi commentary on the Quran. I know those 2. I mean, there are a few ones, like the big, really famous ones, I think, are translated.
Translated.
Not too many.
Yeah, the Tafsir literature has always fascinated me because, just as a person who, I'm all about the aesthetics of commentaries. I'm very pro commentary literature. With Dan's warnings, accepted that some of them are quite bad, but when it comes to when it comes to the Bible, often the commentaries are far more interesting than the Bible. Like the Bible can just be very droll and boring, and then the commentaries dream up all kinds of interesting things that come along with it. I mean, I think the most famous example for me is in the Zohar, where there's that throwaway line about the 10 kings of Edom that died, and it's just a throwaway line, I think, in Genesis 36. But the Zohar is like, yeah, that's about this. That's about the Klipot, and it's like they spin all this yarn about how this like one throwaway verse holds all these like super esoteric secrets. Yeah, I'm like, man, that is fascinating.
Is there a number in it? If there's a number in it, it can be reduced.
It must mean something.
What's so interesting about a lot of these texts that we work with is that they are often basically just really long commentaries on earlier texts like the Bible or the Quran. Like going back to the Meccan revelations, Ibn Arabi will take, those letters at the beginning of some Quranic surahs.
The weird letters.
And there's like chapters of stuff, just interpreting that And I love that kind of thing.
In the Latin Picatrix, there's a chapter that's just like, this chapter does nothing to advance our purposes, and so it's been left out. I forget what the exact wording is. And then if you go to the Arabic version, it's a section about letter mysticism, and so they were just like, this is useless to a Latin audience, so we've just cut the chapter out entirely.
That stuff. I mean, is there any modern, more contemporary scholarship, Philip, about the mysterious letters like Talcine, or like, is there any clear sense of what's going on with those mysterious letters?
The study of lettrism is where it's at.
Yeah,
definitely. It's not much of a living tradition, I think, but I mean, there's scholarship around that stuff. So people, I mean, like Liana Safe, not necessarily her particularly, but people.
Matt Melvin Kushki, who I've had on my show, writes extensively about lettrism, particularly in like an Ottoman and Persianate contexts. But he's definitely my go-to guy for all of that stuff.
Yeah, or particularly about the ones in the Quran. Is there any good guesses about what those are? What the strange ones at the beginning of some of the?
I've read a bunch of interpretations, but I can't recall. I wouldn't do it justice right now. I'd have to go back and look at it, but there are some really fascinating interpretations.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to also this new stuff about Syriac and the Quran, and that stuff is fascinating about what's going on exactly with the. I don't read Arabic very well. It's just interesting about like what how well the actual Arabic is understood and how much of it has to be sort of like re-understood and all the stuff about whether or not Syriac is playing a role in it or not. I don't know. That stuff is fascinating.
Interesting stuff, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. What are you guys working on?
The video about Shams al-Ma'arif, which contains a lot of lettrist stuff. That's like one of the key things about that book. It's talking about the letters and their powers and how they connect to the lunar mansions and all that great stuff. So that's, we're working on a collaboration together, obviously, for Sunday, in which I will be making a video about demons in ancient Mesopotamia. And then I have the Shams al-Ma'arif one coming out next week.
Yeah. Any favorite demon Mesopotamia that's not Pazuzu?
He was like, damn.
You can't do Pazuzu or Humbaba. Although Humbaba may not be a demon, actually.
No
like, I don't know that Humbaba is. I don't know. I always like, there's so many. I like the Gala demons, like the ones that in the underworld. Yeah, in the underworld. Yeah, that what's his name, Dumushti or whatever has to deal with, and Ishtar and stuff when they go underground. The Descent of Ishtar is such an amazing text.
Yep.
But yeah, I think the Gala demons.
The Exorcist the other day, actually, again.
Oh yeah,
still good.
That's a great movie.
It is, I actually, so my wife, they did not grow up watching scary movies at all. So she has a very low tolerance. So I trade her scary movies for things. So I'll watch some movie and then, she'll watch a scary movie with me. But we watched The Exorcist for the first time. And I will say one thing I never noticed about The Exorcist was the sound design of that movie. Like if you watch it with surround sound, which we watch at a place that has happened to have surround sound, which we didn't know. But it is amazing, like hearing the multiple tracks when they're like in the room with Reagan and hearing the multiple tracks of the sounds that she's making simultaneously. And apparently they recorded like a dozen tracks of her like breathing and wheezing. And it's weird to hear that she's like, there are different sounds that she's making all the time, like different layers of sound. And I have to say that was the creepiest part about the movie, having seen it a dozen times or whatever. Having heard it and being like, oh wow, like the sound design on this movie is really, really spooky and like really like frightening.
Yep. It works.
I'm all about Hellraiser. I'm a Hellraiser man.
Yeah. Have you seen the new one?
Yes, I have. I thought it was, I was entertained. It was more of a cautionary tale against necromancers, which
it's true.
Was, in and of itself interesting. They definitely leaned into the fact that the lamentation configuration is some kind of talisman that summons demons, where that is kind of like more alluded to in the first, 8, 9, 10 Hellraiser movies. This one, but there was no Pinhead, so I was like,
I think
I don't know if the guy died or.
No, he's still alive. He really endorsed the new.
Yeah, like his voice is an indispensable part of the Hellraiser aesthetic because he's like a gentleman torturer guy.
Right.
He's not just like a scary demon that tortures you. He's also like a gentleman in a way.
He was like a former army officer, right? Before he was turned into Pinhead.
Yeah, and so just like I felt like they missed the mark on that, but otherwise I was entertained. But the first Hellraiser is where it's at, and that one's totally about summoning demons and the dangers of talismans and so forth.
I mean, I will say that the one thing that I didn't like about the new one, and I don't think it's a spoil anything for anyone. I'll try to avoid spoilers, but I always like the idea that, and I think it's in Hellraiser 2, right, where they were getting people to open the box that they're like mental patients, and when they summon them, the Cenobites are like, we don't like, it's pleasure that calls us, not hands. And I love the idea that you have to want to open the box for them to come at some level, but I didn't like the fact that in this one they just had random people do it. And they're just futzing around with it, and they could open these gates in a way that I like the idea that you have to want them to come. You have to invite them, as opposed to like futzing around with this box. We'll cut your finger and then they come.
Yeah, there was blood involved in this, where it was like you had to have your blood mingle with it, which was never a thing. It was more about just the desire, like a perversion of your desire.
Right, that you had to want them, and I think that was to me like one of the core rules of what makes the Cenobites interesting is that it wasn't. Like, you can't accidentally a Cenobite in the original ones, but in this one you could, and it relied on that idea that you could accidentally bring them. And I found that to be like, it broke one of the rules that I thought was the most interesting in the original, which is funny because, I collect Japanese puzzle boxes. You can see them in the background of all my episodes. And so like puzzle boxes have been a thing that I've been interested in for a lot of years. And like the really complicated Japanese puzzle boxes are really, really neat. So I've always wanted to like, the idea of a puzzle box being a kind of key is an interesting concept to me. But Philip, you got any special, like, you any, like, aside from The Exorcist, any like horror films or whatever you like, spooky films, favorite ones?
Oh wow, that's a good question.
Recommendations for this time of year?
I mean, there's so many of them. We always watch the original Halloween on Halloween night.
It's a good one.
I've never seen that. No.
Really? Oh man, Dan. Now I feel like you at the very beginning of the conversation with the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. What?
Yeah. Flip the table over.
There's too many to pick one, but in the last few years, last film called Empty Man. Have you seen that one?
Which one? You're breaking up a little bit.
Am I back?
Yeah,
you're just back. Repeat what you said.
Yeah.
Last year I saw a film called The Empty Man. If you've seen it.
The Empty Man. Nope.
Almost like 3 hours long horror movie, like cosmic horror stuff.
Interesting.
Really obscure. Like there was no promotion for it basically, and it was really interesting. I recommend that one actually.
Interesting.
It sounds like the title and the trailer makes it seem like it's just one of those silly, horror movies that come out every year, but it's actually really cool.
Interesting. I have to check it out. I will say that a movie that I saw recently in the past couple of years that was like genuinely the most scary movie that I've seen in like probably a decade was a movie called The Dark and the Wicked. Like that was I think the last time that I've seen a movie where I like got up and was like, all right, I'm turning the lights on in my house. Like I'm like, or like there was a moment where I was like watching it in my study and there was no one here. I was by myself in the house. And I was like, all right, I'm not going downstairs.
Yeah.
Like just not going anywhere near a basement, nothing like that. But I will say that like The Dark and the Wicked, if you really want an absolutely, really scary movie, I would recommend it if you really want one. There's a couple scenes in there that like wincingly scary.
Oh, it's recent.
Yeah, it's really recent. It's from a couple of years ago, 2020 actually. Yeah, but I will say that it's genuinely like one of the creepiest movies I've seen in a long time. So yeah, I would recommend it for folks out there who want a scary movie to watch.
It's actually fascinating how difficult it is to scare people. Like, maybe not everybody, but like it's easy to make people like be like grossed out by gore or like cheap jumping at people and that kind of thing. But to make something that actually is psychologically deranges you,
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I saw recently, I'm sure most people have watched it because it just got so many millions and millions of views, was the Internet Historian's special, The Hole, about this guy who climbed into a cave and got trapped in a in a cave. And then I just started watching all of these stories about people who got stuck in caves and like that, like, yeah, really messes with your, like, you're sleeping and you're getting sleep paralysis and you're like, I'm stuck in a tunnel and I cannot move my limbs and there's no one coming to save me and I'm just gonna like expire here. And just that is true horror to me.
Oh yeah, claustrophobia, stuff like that is no, it's
when I got stuck between two doors.
No,
what happened?
I was in a studio, like in a music studio by myself, and I was gonna, like, I was finishing up and I was getting out, and there were two doors basically, probably because of soundproofing and stuff, and they were basically like this close to each other, and I would open the one door and I closed it behind me before I opened the other one and realized that it was locked from the other side. So I was stuck in like this small space. Complete darkness. That wasn't fun.
How long were you in there?
Probably like 15 minutes.
That's pretty bad.
And my phone, I was just banging on the door, and luckily one of the people that were closing up the building heard me and came and opened. So
yeah, I've only had something like that happen once. I was like part of a team of people that were in Diné country out in New Mexico, helping them with some humanitarian stuff, and we were going in a lava tube, and like there's even a warning out to the lava tube, like don't go in here without like flashlights and stuff. And of course I was a complete idiot, like whatever, and like went in and got probably 15-minute walk inside this lava tube. Flashlight died.
Oh no.
Like I had to feel my way back in the dark, and like there was constant like horror, like am I walking the right direction?
Yeah. Which is how these people get stuck in these tunnels.
Yeah.
They are walking in one direction or crawling, I guess, and they think they know where they're going, and then all of a sudden they're like stuck upside down, and
your proprioception goes out the window immediately. Like you're where you are in space, you lose it immediately. It's amazing how quick that can happen. I think it's like didn't they find a corpse in the deepest cave in the world? Like it's in Croatia or something, where they were
probably find them all the time.
I mean, they were like spelunking, exploring, I think, what is the deepest cave system in the world, and they came upon a random somebody who got down there and never. I'm like with the Greeks or whatever on that cave stuff. Like, don't go in there.
Like, it's like an initiation ritual that's terrifying, and
it's like this you accidentally the Elysium mysteries. Don't do that. Don't do that. Yeah, I remember like we were in Mexico and swimming in some of these cenotes, and I was like, they used to throw people in these things for like sacrifices way back in Maya days, in classical Maya days. And I'm like, we're swimming and having fun on top of what is probably lots of skeletons, like at the bottom of this cenote. And it never, like, it just, there was a weird thing where on the one hand, like modern communities own them, and you can swim in them, and it helps those communities to like make money. And it's a tourist thing that everyone does. Even the local people do it. But there was always a moment where I was like swimming around, like, I wonder how many sacrifice victims are at the bottom of this cenote.
I worked on an archaeological site in Romania, and it was in this site called Argamum or Orgame, and there's a necromanteon there, which is really cool. So it's this, you had a temenos for a temple that a church had been built over to desacralize it, but that church was long gone. And under where the altar is, there was like a shaft, and then a tunnel underneath, and then there was like a well outside that it was connected. So it was two like pits connected by a tunnel, and the priest or whoever it was would go under and give out like an oracular voice. So people would dump votive offerings down the well outside, and then the priest would come and collect some of those if they weren't like oil that had shattered at the bottom of the shaft, like food or things like that. And he could speak, and the voice would reverberate through the tunnels and come out of the well. So very interesting. But like excavating that, it was full of snakes. And it was like, you're not getting me in there. Like I'll do whatever, but I'm not going down there because I know there's so many snakes here.
Yeah, no, you can. Yeah, I'm like Indiana Jones when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah,
like not snakes. That's interesting. That's a very Dungeons and Dragons-y.
Totally.
It's like Tomb of Horrors kind of stuff.
And like you can tell how like the association between chthonic rites and snakes like came about like clear as day, because there is no underground shaft that is not populated with snakes in this area of the world. Right. No, it makes total sense. Yeah, that stuff is fascinating. Necromantion. Yeah, it's a great name. Sounds like a band name. A metal band.
Yeah, definitely
Esoterica metal band name. Yep. 3,482.
Right. Yeah, it's like I need to start cataloging all the accidental metal band names I managed to come up with. I wish I could play music. I'm very jealous of you, Philip, of all your range of musical talent, because I'm tone deaf and can't play anything. I would love to be able to like play instruments. Yeah, we got an oud here, and there's no way I can play it. Like I tried, and I'm like, nope, just there's no frets. I don't know what's going on. The neck is too small. Like
it's very different from a guitar.
Yeah, like I approached it as like, how different could it be? And then I was like, no, this is way too different. Have you guys seen where they make the argument basically that black metal is just surf rock without distortion? And they sort of, yeah. And they just take Burzums is the good tunes, yeah. Yeah, they just take all these like, and it's because it's just like the tremolo picking or whatever, and it sounds. They just take all these songs and basically convert them to surf rock, and it sounds amazing. Like I've written entire episodes of Esoterica listening to black metal surf rock, but it is amazing. Like when you hear like that Lebanese style of guitar playing, you're like, oh yeah, this is just all you have to do is really distort this, and now it's Gorgoroth or whatever, Children of Bodom. That stuff is great, but no, I'm jealous of. I mean, you also a musician, right, Dan? Yep. What are you I'm big into Bach, and I've been playing my whole life. Play guitar, play bass, played in metal bands growing up, which was probably my into all of this esoteric stuff. Yeah, I think that was a big driver in a lot of this stuff. But I started, listening to Metallica and kind of like everybody else, and then sort of just got into like, I think Metallica actually was one. My dad was a piano player, or is a piano player, and so I was around classical music a lot, but classical guitar was something that I had to be introduced to, and I think that like Metallica was one of those bands that like was just like, look what you can do with a guitar, look how pretty it sounds. And then it was like, oh, there's a whole world of this stuff out there that is like Fernando Sor and all of these 19th century Spanish virtuoso guitarists, people playing Paganini on guitar, and like, okay, like let's explore this world. And now I'm just obsessed with Bach. That's kind of like Bach is the best. I mean, you ever heard the quote by Sioran, the French pessimist, about Bach? No, it's the greatest Bach. He says Bach is the only evidence that existence is not totally botched. Yes. I like that I agree with. Like, I love pessimism in general, and Sioran is the best, I think, about that stuff. But the idea that Bach is the only evidence that reality is not a botched job. Martin Luther was you know, is famous for saying like, why should the devil have all the good tunes? And he was a luthier. And then it's funny to think that like, not so like, well, maybe 200-300 years later, Bach would come along as a Lutheran and like, just, I mean, he wasn't that famous during his own lifetime. He really was resurrected at a certain point and then made famous. But, you know, everybody who's anybody in the classical music world practices their chops playing Bach, and like their recital music is playing Bach. And it's funny because a lot of the stuff that we play that's like considered the highest form of music was just like his throwaway notes, like where his main thing was writing chorale music, but he wrote little geiges and suites and things like that here and there. And that's the stuff that we really love as moderns. And that to him, they were just kind of trifles in a way. They were not the cornerstones of his repertoire.
I love Bach. Just, I mean, Baroque music in general. That's like I've been listening to a lot of Corelli recently, and I much prefer Corelli to like Mozart or Beethoven. Like, again, I think that the reason why I like black metal also is, at least the more avant-garde black metal, is because of my love of Baroque music. I think they're structurally very similar kinds of music. But yeah, like I can get down with Bach or Corelli, you know, all the time. I love that stuff. But also, like, again, like going back to the oud and stuff like that, like the what's the Armenian flute, Philip, the dikduk or duk, yeah, because I've listened to some of your music writing stuff too, and I really like your music and really like the because I hate
hate mail for saying it's Armenian.
Really? Are they gonna say it's just like they're gonna say it's Turkish?
It's like Greek yogurt. Who invented Greek yogurt?
I just say Anatolian, Central Asian nowadays.
Someone just mentioned Yama Ensemble. Yama Ensemble's great. I have a hatred of Jewish music in general. Like, I love klezmer, like, ironically.
I love klezmer.
Klezmer is just like the most fun thing ever. But like Jewish music, just like the heathens have the best music. I don't know how it is the heathens have like cornered the market on the best music ever. Like, I was at the Heilung show a few weeks at the Masonic Theater in Detroit. Heilung played. I'm like, why can't we have like a Jewish Heilung? Like people playing human bones, I don't know, something weird. But Jewish music is so kumbaya-ish that it like drives me crazy. And I'm like, why? We have to get some like, you know, things like that. Yama Ensemble is a great, someone mentioned in the comments. That's a great little group of people that play like, I don't know. But then I feel like a total Orientalist, like getting into exotic, you know, Turkish music or something. I don't know.
You sent some great stuff. Was it last year, Justin?
Say again, Philip?
You sent me some really great Jewish music last year. I
think that's Yama Ensemble. All that stuff was Yama Ensemble.
I think I know who that is.
And it's great because they take these songs that, you know, there are a lot of, I mean, one, the Bible just has the opportunity to have the most metal songs ever. Like the Psalms, like the voice of Yahweh crushes the mountains and stuff like this. Like, or what is it? The song, like, one of my favorite songs from the Bible is when the women start singing, like, Saul killed thousands, but David killed tens of thousands. And they're just like singing this song about how these warlords are just killing all these people. I'm like, why is this just not mined for?
It is.
Song with this, yeah, but
Jah rained down with fire and lightning.
Yeah, just like, I mean, it's just so like, I don't know. I like the amount of like Wardruna or Heilung or these kinds of bands that could be like, you know, Israelite versions of those, of just how badass Yahweh is. I don't know. So it would be a musical project I would take on if I had any. Yeah, if I had any musical chops, which I don't.
If you had to pick one instrument, Justin, which one would you learn?
Oh God. I'm going to go completely ridiculous and say the harpsichord.
Sure.
Like I like the harpsichord. Like I would like to. I just like the way it sounds.
You can get little ones, eh?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can get. And even my university has one that you can rent to play.
Or just a MIDI controller with a harpsichord patch.
Right. Yeah. That's obvious. That's the easiest thing to do. But I feel like I've actually, you know, futzed around with a harpsichord in real life, just like hit the keys. And it is interesting because it's so unlike a piano, right? Like how a piano is very much like a percussion instrument.
Yeah, no dynamics.
Right, and a harpsichord is nothing like that.
1 or 0, no 50 or 80 or 90.
Right, it's very tinny in that way. But I like the way a harpsichord sounds. But I don't know. Probably, I think if I could learn to play any instrument, and realistically, probably the violin, just because of how much the range of things it can do.
Like a gentleman in the chat is talking about a lute harpsichord, which is really cool. Like you can check out some box suites on lute harpsichord, and they sound awesome. It just sounds like a massive, massive lute.
Interesting. I have to check that out.
Invention, or is it no?
Pardon?
Is it like a newer invention, or has it been around for?
It's been around for a long time.
I mean, there's all kinds of weird instruments from back in the Middle Ages that
like the theorbo and
like a lot of these Baroque instruments that don't exist anymore. Also, I again, like the nerdiness of my life, like I get season tickets to the Academy of Early Music, which plays just Baroque and Renaissance music. And one of the cool things they did a few years ago was they played it was a box suite actually, and they played it both with what is it called? The tuning we use now,
like well-tempered clavier.
Yeah. Oh no, it wasn't that piece of music, but equal
temperament.
Equal temperament, right? Which is how I think everything is tuned now. But they played two pieces, one in equal temperament, and they had another harpsichord tuned to the way Bach would have played it. And it's amazing how different it sounds.
Oh.
And they played a bunch of like Bach. They had a bunch of harpsichords and other things tuned to not equal temperament, tuned to what it would have been in Bach's day. And they're all the classic things you've heard 1,000 times. But it was really interesting hearing them played on instruments tuned to actual Baroque tuning. Which equal temperament's just it's mathematically convenient, but it's not the way most of that music sounded to the people that when they first heard it. So it's interesting hearing it tuned that way.
Yeah.
Is that the kind of thing you can do on a modern, like Philip? Can you change the tuning on that piano back there? I mean, it's just modulating at a different frequency or whatever.
There's a little thingy that you can wiggle and go where.
And here, but you can also like if you have a DAW, like a software, you can tune it in there too.
Yeah. Does anyone do that? Like,
I think so.
Like do weird tuning. I mean, so it's so easy now digitally. You just wiggle a thing and you get different. It's much more difficult to retune a harpsichord. Which also the reason why I wouldn't want to do a harpsichord is because you have to tune those things like every time you play them. Apparently, they're especially if it's humid or it's not climate controlled, they come out of tune. Just like you look at them hard and they're out of tune.
Mm-hmm.
But
and they're probably difficult to tune too.
I can imagine.
I don't know, but like a piano is really hard to tune.
Yeah, you have to pay people. When we moved in our house, when we moved in our house, there was a piano in our house, like a baby grand piano, which was apparently was left there because the people didn't want to move it. And I was like hoping that it could be tuned and fixed just to have a baby grand piano, but it turned out it was like in bad shape. But it's funny that's apparently a common thing in Detroit is to move into these older houses and there be like a piano that's been there since the house was built. But yeah, it was kind of.
Maybe I should get in that line of work. Piano tuning, good money.
It's a thing. I mean, we the guy that was good that came in to look at ours. I forget we paid him like I don't know a couple $100, and he was there for 20 minutes.
Yeah,
it's like it's not worth tuning or whatever. But at any rate, all right, guys. I think I have to get going. I'm sure my wife is supposed to be here. Should be here anytime with one of the kinder. I'm getting ready for Shabbat, but great to know you guys. Great to hang out. Thank you so much for, on short notice. I folks in the chat are watching, and I just emailed these guys like an hour before the live stream. I was like, hey, come out, hang out with me. And luckily they're cool enough to come hang out with me. So
yeah, thanks for inviting us.
Pleasure.
And I was out gardening, and it was definitely worth coming in for.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. And I guess we'll see each other at some point pretty soon in terms of Sunday. We'll release our spooky videos.
Yep.
And then we'll continue from there. But you guys have a great night. My best to your partners, your families. And
likewise.
yeah. See you guys soon. Everybody in the chat, thank you guys so much. Also, everybody's been so supportive, and all the super chats and super stickers and subscribing. Thanks for taking a channel that should obviously have very little subscribers, because it literally is called Esoterica, and thank you for getting up to 200,000 subscribers. I really appreciate. I mean, it boggles my mind that there are hundreds of thousands of people out here that want to learn weird things about the Inquisition or whatever.
Yeah.
More like Exoterica.
Yeah. Am I right?
Am I right?
Yeah, it's I think you said right in your comment. If we get too big, then
if you get 1 million followers, subs, then you got to hand in your license.
Yeah, you're not true anymore. You're not cult.
Yeah, exactly.
So you
lose
lose your
rules.
Yeah, you lose your cult status when you get big enough. You have to your channel's only cool if it has 6 subscribers. So, all right, well, we'll see. All right, it was good to see you guys. Again, thanks so much for folks in the chat and for supporting the channel, and for the folks at Patreon that make this all this possible. Thank you, all of you, for doing that, and Philip and Dan and Angela, who's off. Yeah, see you guys later. You guys have a great night. Talk to you later. Bye.
See you on Sunday.
Yep, see you Sunday.